You're listening to Speaking Sidemount, the podcast where we talk all things sidemount diving, from equipment, skills, techniques, and sidemount diving expeditions to interviews with some of the world's top sidemount divers. Whether you're new to sidemount, been sidemount diving for years, or just want to know more, this is the place for all things sidemount. I'm your host, Steve Davis. Let's get wet. Hey, welcome back to Speaking Sidemount. I'm Steve Davis. This episode is sponsored by X-Deep and brought to you with the support of the patrons of Speaking Sidemount. We'll talk more about X-Deep and how we use the X-Deep Stealth 2.0 in our diving in this week's episode, but regardless, huge thanks to X-Deep and also to our Patreon supporters. If you'd like to know more about how you can support the show and the additional episodes and content that is available exclusively to patrons, please go to www.patreon.com/speakingsidemount for all of the info. I'll have the link in the podcast notes. Well, the busyness and craziness continues. Amazing times for sure. Wherever you are, I hope that you are keeping well and able to get wet somewhere awesome. I've just got back from an amazing trip to the Mikhail Lermontov wreck in the Marlborough Sounds with Pete Mesley's Lust for Rust. It's hard to rationalise how the disappointment of missing out on Truck Lagoon and cave diving in Mount Gambier, Australia this year has been replaced with a heap of diving in our local wrecks here in New Zealand, with the Lermy, as we call her, being one of the very best. If you haven't seen it, I put up a video on the trip on the Sidemount Pros YouTube channel, and for the patrons of Speaking Sidemount, I have a special bonus video in production where I talk you through our strategy to progressively penetrate the wreck and traverse to the Leningrad restaurant and then get into the cruise mess, one of the signature spaces of the wreck. It's not to be missed, especially how we addressed the spiral staircases, which are absolutely a mind-bending way to navigate through a wreck, that's for sure. So on with this episode. Now, while I was working and training at Gozo Technical Diving under the tutelage of Tom Steiner, I completed my full cave training at Cava del Agua in Isla Plana, Spain. It's an amazing cave. I've spoken about it in several previous episodes, including with my guest Gary Dallas. So when I saw a post from Isla Plana local Victor Tovar about his requirement for pre-course checkout dives, another subject very dear to my heart, I had to find out more. Victor is the principal of Cave Tribe, through which he provides specialised and personalised dive training with an emphasis on sidemount and cave courses. Victor is passionate about the foundational skills, and as you'll hear in this episode, he focuses on progressively building these skills while gaining experience and comfort in the environments his students wish to explore. In this episode, Victor and I discuss his background in diving and how he got into sidemount and cave diving. We discuss and he shares more on his philosophy in developing divers, and we talk about the importance of selecting the right equipment. And there's traps there for instructors in forming relationships with equipment manufacturers. And so we discuss that from both of our perspectives. And then we go deep and far into Victor's home cave, Cava del Agua. We talk about what makes it different and how its unique challenges make it a great cave for both new and seasoned cave divers. We discuss the difference between exploration and sport cave diving, and then finish with an update on the current extent of exploration of Cava del Agua. All this and much, much more in this episode of Speaking Sidemount. Hey Victor, welcome to Speaking Sidemount.
Hi Steve, thank you very much for your invitation. It's such an honor to be here with you speaking about the Sidemount stuff.
Yeah, look, I've been really looking forward to this for a whole lot of reasons, and I'll explain that to you as we go through it. But thanks so much for joining me. I know English is not your first language, very much your second language,
Definitely.
So we'll go as slowly as we can. But thanks for coming on and sharing with all of us. So just to get us started, can you share a little bit about how you got started in diving?
Well, my story is a bit different, I think, because I started as a scientific diver of a university here in Spain, of Granada, the city of Granada. And I needed the open water certification just to work there, okay? So it was not really a spot for me. So I started there. And I can say from there, it's also started my passion for cave diving. They have a small project of fauna of small marine caverns and little caves. And then I started to look in the internet. It was the year 2005, if I'm not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to look in the internet for cave diving training and how to do it because we were pure recreational divers. So I remember I found a video of Jackson Blue Spring in Florida.
Yes.
With divers diving in Sidemount with steel tanks and DPVs. And it was amazing. So that was the first thing I saw about Sidemount. It was all at the same time, I think.
Right. So you got started in recreational diving and then started to explore cave diving. How did that go? I mean, you saw Jackson Blue. How did you actually get into cave diving?
Well, I started to look for instructors, but it was the year that Steve Bogarts uploaded his famous videos of Sidemount. So there weren't really Sidemount training in that year. Okay. So I remember a video of Steve Bogarts, not in caves, but in open waters, going down a water column to dive in a wreck. And he was like floating in the water, spreading his tank to show how free he was. And I was like, well, I want to do that. From there, I started to investigate and I found Steve Martin. I contacted him. I exchanged with him a couple of emails. And at the end, I bought from him a first Razor 1 harness. I have to say I haven't proper Sidemount training because there wasn't any. But I tried it by myself with big steel tanks with a jacket-style BCD on top of the harness. It was a disaster. So I'm happy to have been on distance. I like to say part of that process of modern Sidemount. Okay, so I feel I've been watching by myself how all the thing went during all this modern history of Sidemount. Maybe 8 years later, I started to work in a diving school in Almeria, another city here. And they had steel classic, so I tried them. They were awesome. Then I bought my own tech. All that is recent history.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, it's an amazing story, isn't it? And how many people Steve Bogarts has influenced, and also Steve Martin for that matter, because I remember 2010, 11, when I was starting to look at Sidemount diving, I found exactly the same videos. I found the one of Steve Bogarts in Ponderosa, the first skills video. And then, yes, I did see the one where he was wreck diving as well in the Razor. And then I saw a lot of Steve Martin's material, and he put a lot of material up online in that time frame where he was talking about the benefits of Sidemount. And I was really heavily influenced by that as well. And so from my point of view, I credit the two Steves, if you like, with some of the growth
in Sidemount.
There are, and it's a good name. And I fear for the name Steve sometimes. I think it's dying out. I think there's nobody under 40 years old called Steve at the moment. We need more kids to be called Steve. Look, it was really great to be able to watch both of those guys and see the skill level that they were demonstrating and the passion they had for Sidemount and why they thought it was a great way to go in terms of multi-cylinder diving. And certainly it influenced me, and it sounds like very similar for you. So from those beginnings where you were teaching yourself Sidemount diving, how did that then progress into cave training?
People think that Sidemount is for me some kind of love. I only do Sidemount and it's only Sidemount and everyday Sidemount, but not the actual story here. I think Sidemount is a super nice tool for cave diving for several reasons. Separate weights, and you can check yourself what's happening on your gear. You can go into small holes and all that stuff. But I feel, and I've been a lot of years diving in Sidemount, I feel still it's like a tool, okay? So I don't have anything against putting a twin set on your back to go boat diving with rough seas, okay? So for me, Sidemount is let's say it's a cave tool, okay? You can use it everywhere you want, but it's a cave tool. And here, but I know you have trained here in the Cueva del Agua, where I live. For me, it's a great equipment to dive here because it's a cave that the access is pretty difficult, not very long, but it's a big slope.
And it's interesting, isn't it? The first time I looked down from the top to the bottom, and it's an amazing view looking down at Cave del Agua where you can see the sinkhole there. And just looking down that slope thinking, how the hell am I going to get my gear down there? And my buddy on my full cave course was in a twin set. And so we had the comparison of me going down with Sidemount, taking one cylinder down at a time, because it's a pretty precarious slope. and this poor guy having to carry down his twin set. And I feared for his life every time. I thought, man, if you fall, that's going to be a real mess on the bottom. And then I saw the line that goes down that the explorers have been using. I thought, how do you get to use that line? That would have been amazing.
I always say it's the most dangerous part of cave diving here. The way down with the equipment. I'm not kidding.
I agree. No, I think I agree with you.
If you sleep on your foot, you probably is going to die there with a twin set on your back. So for me, it's important. Well, I became a Sidemount instructor, of course. Later, I became a cave instructor as well. And I started to teach by myself as a freelance 3 years ago, if I'm not wrong. And I moved here to the cave because I think it's the perfect cave for teaching here in Spain, because the other ones are very cold and maybe deep. Maybe they don't have too many navigation options. So Cueva del Agua is great for teaching. So I moved here, and I have developed my whole business around Cueva del Agua, to be honest. I'm completely in love with this cave. I think I have, let's say, between 300 and 400 dives there, and I'm not tired of it. Great.
It's an amazing cave, isn't it? From so many different perspectives. And the things that I noticed, I mean, I've only done maybe 10 dives in it as part of my full cave course. I mean, the first thing that you notice, of course, is the slope to get in and the access, which is reasonably easy once you're at the bottom. You just sort of go down a little step and you can do your primary tie off to a little ring bolt there, which is really nice. But what is really cool then is once you go through that 6 meter level, which is at about 21 Celsius, you're very quickly in 29, 30 degree water, which is just so comfortable no matter what you're wearing. You can dive dry suit, of course, there if you want to, but it's very comfortable in a wetsuit as well. And that makes things really nice to begin with. But you very quickly learn at Cueva del Agua that it is an extremely silty cave. From a teaching cave, I think it does teach you a lot about the body position and finning technique and propulsion technique. Because you get it wrong and you make a mess and there's no flow, is there? So if you make a mess, it's going to hang around for a day or two for sure.
Yes, that thermal gliding you said, very impressive for the first time when divers come here. It's like, whoa, because you're in the surface, putting all the stuff on, you get used to that temperature. And when you pass through the thermal glide, it's like going to hell. It's like, what's this? Yes, it's a thermal source. It's pretty nice. And yes, the cave is apart from that silt problem you talked about. It's a very easy cave because it has an average of 10 meters. It's like it's not a kind cave, but you have that issue. It's all the bottom is mud. So you have to be very, very, very precise in movement, in technique, in navigation, in knowing how to deal with completely zero visibility. So for me, it's a very nice cave to train. Because when you train in rocky bottom, maybe some errors can be hidden there, okay? So you touch a little bit, maybe no one notices it. So with this cave, you cannot do it. You will see all the cloud going up and starting to mess everything.
Yeah, and it brings me on to a couple of points, because I've watched your video of you put a recent one up of you moving through the cave there, and one of the impressive things about it, and one of the things I love about the way that you were diving is you're extremely slow. And very calm and very relaxed, and you were able to hold your position in the water, and that's how I love to dive. I think it's the best by far way to dive anywhere, but somewhere like Cueva del Agua, it's really important. You have to move around there extremely carefully, and so that means slow. Anything that you try to do quickly, I notice a lot of people when they back kick, as an example, they really try to thrash around and try and do it too hard. And you should try to be really subtle and gentle when you're doing all of your kicks. And it's important somewhere like Cueva del Agua. And that brings me on to another thing. I mean, I love the name of your business, by the way, Cave Tribe. I think it really describes the feeling that you have as a cave diver as you become part of this group, this tribe of people who just fall in love with this environment. Tell me a little bit about the training that you do and some of your philosophy around diver training.
Well, for me, the balance, position, finning technique are super important, of course, but it's important as well to have the correct mindset. So when you dive in a cave, you have to be super chill, okay? You have to be a very calm mindset. You have to be diving cool as a cucumber, as I said. It's very important to first achieve your technique level, okay? Then get trained in a proper equipment gear for your dive. Okay? In this case, it can be side mount, it can be back mount. I don't care, as long as you manage to use it properly.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you have that, you can start your case training. But when you start your case training, you need to have that level already achieved. Okay?
Yes.
I don't understand when people really want to go into cave diving and they don't know how to do a back kick, or their buoyancy is not really well. They can vary it between 1 meter or so, but not really stable. And when you dive in a cave, you need to be completely steady in water.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some places that the cave is very huge, so you don't need maybe to be so precise. But there are others that it's not restrictions, but very narrow galleries. So your position should be perfect there. Okay. So I didn't understand the thing of diving in a cave, diving fast, feeling fast with some kind of rush in your head. I think when you dive in caves, you have to have the correct mindset, because this is a sport. Okay. We do it for recreational concerns. Okay. So having a rush inside a cave is not good. Okay. So once you achieve that technique, it's the moment that you have to learn cave diving. And I always say that the cave diving training should be very easy. Okay. Because you don't have to learn buoyancy, feeling technique, how to manage your side mount gear, whatever, inside the cave. That should be done previously. So when you reach your cave diving training, it should be easy for you. Okay. So being able to have a good technique and a good buoyancy and use your fins just to advance, not to keep yourself in a place inside a cave, should be something achieved first to cave diving. Okay. So for me, it's pretty important. And in my training, all my students know that they have to do it first in open water before going into the cave.
Yeah, and you made a really interesting post about that the other day on Facebook, which was when you don't know a diver and they're asking to come on a high-level course such as cave training, you ask them for either a face-to-face test or a video. And you mentioned that sometimes that's a little unwelcome, that request, and perhaps people consider it insulting. But as you say, it's the best way to make sure they get proper use of training. And I used to find this in Gozo as well, when we'd get people to come to Gozo Technical and they're coming for X number of days expecting to do a certain course in so many days. And then they turn up on day one and you find that their skill level is not really ready for this level of training they want to do. And so you've always got to have a pretty difficult conversation about that and then find some useful method of using that time to have remedial training for them. So tell us a bit about how you go through that in your philosophy in terms of assessing students as they turn up.
Well, I have to say I have the luck of being able to offer personal training in diving. So my students, we have a long-term relationship, okay? So we start, maybe they are recreational divers. We start with open water side mount, basic side mount. Okay, so they do several dives with it. We can start with a little bit more complex dives in side mount, maybe using a stage or whatever. Or even they are recreational divers and they don't know how to fin let's say a frog kick or whatever. So we can start in early ages of diver development. Okay, for me it's very easy because I know them. At what point are them in the training stairs, let's say. But sometimes I have an email from someone that I don't know, and they ask me to do a super advanced course, like a multi-stage side mount in the cave with a DPV. And I'm always like, whoa, that's a pretty high level, okay? So first, I have to know you, because it's lots of time to go to the cave if you don't know how to manage your basic side mount stuff, or your finning technique or whatever. For me, it's very important to know what are the basics of that diver, okay? So the best thing to do it is to go to the water, because if we have a good feeling, okay, we probably are going to train for a lot of months or maybe years, but we need to start at some point. So it's not possible to do it. It's a sad thing, to be honest, but it's not possible to know it only by the certification cards. Because, we all know how this works, and that's not enough. So minimum for advanced training, I need a video, minimum. I prefer to do it face by face, but I understand that if you live in England, in UK, and you have to came here to make a first test and you don't pass, it's difficult for you. So a video should be enough. But yes, I need a test first, because if not, it's probably 99% of the time it will be a disaster. I do it as well with recreational levels, which I like to teach as well. I love to teach beginner divers, but the test is less strict, okay? Because normally with a couple of questions like how is your buoyancy, how do you feel in water, how you understand your gear, well, some kind of basic questions, it's enough, but not for multi-stage DPV cave diving.
Absolutely.
You need to show your skills.
And a lot of it, especially at those beginner levels, is around comfort in the water, isn't it? If they're comfortable, particularly with their mask, if they're comfortable with their basic equipment, even if their buoyancy skills aren't that great, but you can see they feel good in the water, then it's not that difficult to be able to start to progress them in the open water and focus on that. So when you start to try and build that foundation level with your students, what sort of process do you go through? Or what do you focus on in terms of improving a diver if, let's say, they're not up to scratch?
Well, for me, buoyancy and balance is the base for everything. Once you got it, you can build everything you want on it. So we work in, I say, not even groups, one student or maybe two, okay? But normally one-to-one, instructor and student. And we build first foundation in balance and then in buoyancy, okay? We know how to use your lungs, how to use properly your BCD. Once you got it, you go and dive, okay? You have to put it in your back of your mind. It should be something completely unconscious, okay? If you don't do it in an unconscious way, you're not going to build something interesting later, okay? So it has to be like walking by the street, okay? So it's something that you're going underwater and you dive that way, and that's all. So first, I put a lot of effort on that base. And later, it depends on the interest of that diver. Because not everyone wants to do cave diving or Simon or whatever. So the base is the same for everybody. And later, we do a personal training plan for each diver.
That sounds awesome. And you're in a beautiful place there. I mean, Isla Plana has a beautiful coastline. And Cave del Agua, I don't know if many people know this, but it's virtually right on the coastline. So it's actually extremely close to the ocean. And there's beautiful beaches. And I remember the nice little restaurants. And it's a really beautiful part of Spain, isn't it? And do have some nice ocean diving, even though I haven't experienced it. I definitely had a chance to look out at it and see some of the boats and things there. So it's a great location in order to be able to do lots of different types of diving.
Yeah, we have the luck that we are in a kind of a bay that is pretty close to the wind, okay? So unless the wind came just directly from south, we have a very calm open waters here, so we can train whatever we want. And the temperature is not really bad all year. Winter is a bit cold, but not less than 13, 14 degrees. It's not like the 5 degrees that they have in north, okay? So it can be done. So it's pretty cool. The only issue I could have, maybe it's that this is not a cave country, okay? So Cueva del Agua is pretty nice, super cool, super big. It has a lot of possibilities, but maybe some people want to have 10 caves or 20 caves, like in Mexico or in South France. This is not the case. That part is a bit limiting, to be honest. I wish I had several caves here, but well, this cave is so amazing, so it can stand by itself.
Yeah, and there is an interesting facet to that. I mean, I find the same with wreck diving. Sometimes I went to Truck Lagoon, for example, and there's 60 or 70 wrecks there, and your head gets turned by a new wreck every day. But there's a lot of value in learning one wreck or one cave and starting to learn it really well. You know, I didn't get a great chance to explore Cave del Agua, but I did get a chance to do a few of the jumps around the entrance there and then some of the jumps a bit further along. And it was just so interesting, the layout of the cave. And so learning that, I can see that that would be really interesting. How far has that cave been explored now, and what's happening there in terms of the exploration side?
Well, it's a pretty complex labyrinth with only one exit, but we are reaching now more than 5 kilometers of galleries, and it's increasing, okay? The problem is that the farthest point is really complex, okay? It's very far. You have to pass through several restrictions. The last part of the cave is really, really, really muddy and silty. It's very complex. And I think at some point you need a rebreather there, because bubbles are there. If you have time enough and technique enough, this cave would offer you a lot of enjoyment, a lot. I told you I have hundreds of dives there. I'm not already exhausted of it. So, but the end of the cave currently, because I told you it's increasing, it's really complex. It's not really for the average recreational cave diver or sports cave diver, let's say.
Yeah, very nice. Now, we talked a little bit about having a technique and skill platform. And then you mentioned a little bit with that as well, how important equipment is and having the right equipment. Now, you and I both dive X-Deep, and we're both brand ambassadors for Deluxe tank straps as well, which I absolutely love. Talk us through a little bit about how you built up your equipment and how you make selections for the particular equipment you choose to dive.
Well, I choose to dive and to teach pretty standardized configuration because I have here students from all over the world, okay? So I feel the need to teach them something that they can use everywhere. So it's pretty common, maybe in the whole world, but I would say in Europe, to invent a configuration depending on the cave you're going to dive, okay? But in my case, as an instructor, I feel that need of teaching standardized as it can be configuration. So for the gear, I always choose the gear first and then talk about ambassador programs, okay? So I think it's the only way to do it, because if you're selling an equipment that you're not comfortable with, you're probably not going anywhere with it, okay? It's not cool. I always work for the tech dry suits. Super awesome. For me, they are the best suits. I'm completely in love with my dry suit. You talked about diving here with a wetsuit, but I've done it a lot of times, but this dry suit is so comfortable that I changed completely. So I choose first my gear and then talk about making a deal with brands, because it's the only way to have a good relation between us and to sell in a honest way.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and I have relationships with a few companies, but they're all things that I've been diving, not just for a small amount of time either. Before I started any relationship with X-Deep, I'd been diving their gear for over 6 years. You know, the same with Shearwater. I got my first Shearwater computer in 2012. So I'd been diving it for a long time before anything there. Deluxe tank straps, I started using those in Gozo when I saw one of the other guys using them and immediately fell in love with what those guys do. And so I think it is really important, isn't it? And there's a couple of aspects to that. Number one, you only want to be promoting what you're using and what you love, because if it's not supporting your diving, then how can it support anyone else's? And then the other aspect to that is that, you know, we have to maintain our integrity. I mean, it's very easy to get, especially in this industry where it is tough to make money, right? I mean, you were talking about doing one-to-one diver training. That's just an extremely tough way to make a lot of money. It's a great way to produce fantastic divers. In my opinion, I teach the same way as you do. I love doing one-to-one or one-to-two. I'm even resistant to do 3 people on a foundational side mount course because it can easily be done. But I prefer 2 because then we've got a buddy team that I can watch. So it's not financially the best way to do it, but it's certainly the best way to produce divers. And I think from our point of view, sometimes a little bit of extra money can mean a lot for us, but integrity is everything, isn't it?
Yes, and customers feel it. They see it through social networks or whatever you do, but they see it. They see that you dive with the gear you choose, you sell the gear you choose. When they see that you're happy and it works for you, they want to buy it. It's not, you don't need to sell anything. Just, I wear this because it works for me. I love it. It's awesome. So they want the same as you have. So it's that part of integrity. For me, if you want to be a recognized instructor offering a high quality product, it's a must completely.
Yeah, agree. So obviously you're an X-Deep diver. I'm imagining you have people turning up with other types of harness BCD systems. How do you deal with that? Because that is something that can be a challenge if you're specialized in one particular system.
Well, the basic concepts are the same for every kind of harness. The problem is that when we go to the water, not all of them perform the same way, okay? Adjustment is pretty easy to do, but later the students have to deal with their own gear. So I always tell them, if you don't know what you're doing or you know what to buy, don't do it, just wait. I will tell you, just try this one or try the other one and then buy, okay? For me, it's important to buy your gear before starting the training. I don't rent gear. I don't like it because if I teach you to do Sidemount and you're not going to dive later, I know that you're not going to be a good Simon diver because it needs practice. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's important to buy your own gear. And it's, of course, more expensive the higher the level. But if you know what to buy, just wait or just ask me before it, and I will tell you this gear works, this not. I'm not exclusively a XD instructor, so I'm okay if you want to use a razor or tech line or whatever. But of course, I choose a XD for something. Okay, so if you ask me and you don't have any clue of what to buy, I will tell you buy an XD because it's going to work for sure. Okay, others can work or not, but XD it's going to work because it's proven by thousands of or even millions of divers and in all kind of environments. So you're not going to go wrong with it.
Yeah, the environment thing is really important because what I find is that some of the different harnesses around the world are fantastic at what they do. You know, all of them have had a lot of thought has gone into them. I don't think there's very many on the market that don't work at all, but some of them are certainly designed for very specific environments. And so moving them from one to another can be challenging. And boy, I've dived my XD Stealth 2.0 Tech in just about every environment you can think about. You know, I've dived in tropical water with aluminium cylinders, no problem. And with very little adjustment, you know, I've just had to adjust to a thin wetsuit from my dry suit. And that's all. I've taken it to cold water. I've taken it to caves. I've taken it to wreck diving. I've gone to Trimix 4 cylinders, no problem whatsoever. In fact, even the recreational XD, I have a wreck as well. And I've dived that Trimix and truck with a wetsuit. It's a fantastic system from that point of view, how versatile it is. And at the same time, its foundation is really all about cave diving. It's so streamlined and so fitted to your body and so tight and compact that it's just, I love it. And it's certainly my preference. I agree with what you said, though. I think you made a really good point there, which was if you're going to turn up for a course in whatever equipment, whether it be an XD harness or whether it be a tech line or a razor or whatever, then you need to make sure that it's part of you. It needs to be almost as one with your body. So when you put your equipment on, everything is styled in. Of course, I'll help students do that on my courses, but I'm not as experienced on some of the other ones as I am on XD. So that can take some time. And so they have to be prepared. If they want me to help them dial something in, then they have to be prepared to spend the time on that if they haven't done it themselves already. So we talked a little bit about your progression as a side mount diver and how you basically trained yourself. And so there's lots of different ways to side mount, and I've been covering a lot of this on Speaking Side Mount, you know, everything from Toddy style to the Steve Bogarthian method that I dive. How did you develop your side mount diving? Because you started on the Razor 1, you very much taught yourself. You know, what influenced you and how did you progress, and where are you now in terms of your side mount configuration, the method that you dive?
Well, basically, you told that concept of Bogartian. I dive that way. I have to say that I'm pretty much a Mexican diver, okay? I would like to tell you a little bit because when I started with this self-training, I started to speak as well with an instructor in Mexico called Santiago Pintado. I don't think he remembers me, but I always say, and I'm very thankful, that he was my first Simon instructor because there weren't anyone in Spain. So we exchanged a lot of messages or emails, and he taught me my very base of Simon. Okay, so thank you very much, Santiago, from here. And later, I started my proper training in that school in Almeria, I told you. So that's I went to an official Sidemount diver and then an instructor and all that stuff. But yes, my gear and my configuration is the concept that Bogarts created with the long hose. Pretty much the Hogartian, the original DIR Hogartian concept with a short hose in your necklace and that. And I feel it's super cool configuration because it can be standardized and it can work with mixed teams. Okay? And it's pretty easy to find gear currently. In the beginning, Sidemount was very do-it-yourself. But now you can buy whatever you want, and that configuration works for everybody. Even you have regulator sets with that configuration, okay? So for me, it's great because I haven't found any problem with it. Even some people say that the long hose in a restriction or whatever is something difficult, but I never found out. So I don't feel the drill of donating gas as an emergency, something that you're going to use very often. But having the option of donating gas for maybe 10 minutes, 20 minutes in a dive, when you have some not very dangerous problem in a cave, it can save you a little bit of time and it can put you in a safer situation. Okay, for me, having that long hose is an advantage. And it's very cool to have that same protocols as back mount, because people normally start diving with back mount. So changing to side mount is pretty easy for them if they know the drills, how to clip the long hose, how to change, let's say, the backup regulators. In side mount, there's no backup, but they are in back mount. I love that configuration. I think it's currently the standard for side mount, and it's super useful for 99% of the situation. And I'm very happy with it. Maybe in the future I change, but I think not for now and not for a long time.
Yeah, I think I very much agree with you and have come from a similar background. I mean, I was trained in Mexico, so obviously I'm going to be diving the Mexican style. But it's really hard to argue against the long hose when you talk about team diving, as you said, and how similar it is to the Hogarthian back mount diving methodology. I mean, the only real difference is that the donate what you breathe thing doesn't really apply. But there's a lot of advantages around being able to donate a hose that you breathed off in the last 2 to 5 minutes. So you know for sure that it's working. Everything else looks the same. The ability to donate, whether it's in your mouth or not, is there. If you have some kind of breakaway and it's clipped off, who cares? Everything works really, really well. And then, of course, if you are at the higher end of exploration where the long hose either offers you no benefit because you are in major restrictions and you simply would not be able to donate a hose, or the hose itself is going to become a problem, then Steve Bogarts himself dives 2 short hoses when he's exploring. And so the bottom line there is that it's very easy to convert your right regulator to have another short hose on it with a left side entry, and then you're again in a very comfortable configuration that you're used to, but you don't have the long hose. But for 99% of divers on 99% of their dives, having that long hose is of value. I also agree with you again about how often are you really going to have to donate gas, especially in an emergency, because in side mount, we have to think about what could possibly cause a double failure. Both regulators are gone.
You have to do a lot of wrong things to...
Again, you know, my last episode with Steve Bogarts, right, where he's in a cave and he completely clogs one regulator and then he's been going through clay and the other one's failed as well. There's an example, but again, that's at the absolute extreme end of side mount diving or of diving full stop. And so, yes, it's possible, but it's actually not very likely. What's more likely is that you have a failure and that compromises your gas planning and you working into your contingency. And now all of a sudden somewhere, not all of a sudden, somewhere in the dive plan, you're going to say, hey, look, I'm low on gas now. Can I have some of yours? And so you, of course, are carrying a contingency for your buddy as well. And you can start to use that, but it's not that likely that it's going to become this urgent, I need gas right in this very moment. What could, of course, happen is you come across someone in a cave, and talking to Ed Sorensen, this is the sort of thing that he's bumped into a few times where you're in a cave and it's some other team, nothing to do with your guys, and they've had a problem. And then, of course, that can happen, and it can be extremely problematic, in his words, a bit violent when somebody's desperate for gas and they need it. But again, it doesn't happen that often.
Anyway, Steve, I would like to punctualize there. You talked about the exploration. It's a very interesting part because we instructors tend to talk about exploration, but real actual explorers are very few. All instructors talk about exploration all the time, and even students talk about exploration, but in the real world, none of them explores anything. Okay, we are all sport cave divers having fun. So I think some of the rules for exploration maybe could be the same, but it's a completely different world. Okay, so we have to understand cave diving and training and all that stuff as a sport. Okay, so when we talk about exploration, we're doing a pretty dangerous thing. Is that putting a beginner in an exploration scenario? Okay. So it's not going to happen maybe in the next 10 years or so. And it happens. That's not the case in 99% of the case. So I like to tell people that we are not explorers. There are explorers. They are amazing, but not our case. So we are divers. We need to understand our configuration. We're not going to be under circumstances like not knowing how it's a cave, having no line because I need to put it myself, not knowing what's after the next corner. So that's not a real case for normal, let's say normal divers, average divers.
Yeah.
So that thing of the configuration and if it fits in an exploration scenario or a super strict passage or whatever, well, we have to be careful with that, saying that.
Agree completely. Because there's only so many Steve Bogarts, Brian K. Cooks, Patrick Woodmans, Chris Jewell, all of those sort of guys. I mean, there's only a very limited number of them. And when you think about what they've gone through to get to the levels that they're at now, it's not really a young man's sport in that perspective, unless you start very young, and then I guess they have a mindset. I think back to some of those guys and talking to them, and they've always been explorers to some degree. I kind of feel like almost the way that you can look at it as a sport cave diver is you're almost a discoverer as opposed to an explorer. And so what you're doing is you're discovering or exploring things that you haven't seen before.
Exactly.
So for instance, if I go to Cave del Agua and I go anywhere past about 1 kilometer into the cave, then I'm exploring because I've never been there before, right? And that can be incredibly interesting. The same with wreck diving. You're not necessarily looking at something that hundreds or thousands of people haven't seen before, but it's something that you haven't seen before. And so there's a lot of discovery, and that can be just as exciting. And as you say, far less dangerous than going through a grinder restriction mud and clay field that nobody has ever been through before, not knowing whether you can actually get through or not.
Exactly.
That's a whole different ballgame, isn't it?
That's not really sport cave diving. So it's your as you say, it's discovering more than exploring. I agree. If it's your first time, you're going to explore by yourself a new cave for you, but you know how's the map, you know how's in depth. You probably have a guide or a buddy that knows the cave. So it's not really exploring. Okay, so talking about exploring is a bit misunderstanding the actual thing. Okay.
I love that, and thank you for raising that.
We love the concept of being an explorer.
Yes, yeah, very much so. So let's go back to Cave del Agua for a second, because you're talking a little bit about guiding, and I'm assuming that you do quite a lot of guiding in Cave del Agua for people like me, for instance. So if I came back, I'd love to look you up and get you to take me for a dive there. That would be brilliant. So when you're guiding in Cave del Agua, what sort of process do you go through for that?
Well, I don't have time limiting. I ask for about 80 euros per dive, plus all the expensive. Okay, so longer dive with more tanks and with the scooters, it's going to be expensive because you have to pay all the fills, you have to pay the rent of the scooters and all the stuff. But the cost of the guide itself, it's going to be the same. It's like 80 per diver. It's more or less a fair price, I think. And
very much.
Well, we have to ask prices to support our activity, because if you're too cheap, you're not going to offer a good service, and people have to understand it. They all want cheap prices, but if you go cheap, you're not going to have a good service. I give everything I have. I do my best, everything, every time, but it costs money.
I don't think 80 euro is out of order in any way, shape or form. I had a great discussion with Ryan Costiari about this as well, in terms of, as instructors, valuing ourselves and valuing what we're giving our customers. And for you to be able to guide someone through Cave del Agua, that's taken literally decades of dive training, hundreds of dives in there yourself to learn the cave and be knowledgeable about it. So for me or for anyone else to come along and tap into that diver experience and that specific location experience, that's worth money, man. And so I have no problem whatsoever in paying guides.
That's pretty interesting, because exactly as you tell, the first year I came here to live, I spent almost the whole first year diving 3 to 4 times per week, knowing the cave with a buddy here, no business, no nothing, just knowing the cave. So I know every corner. When I go with people inside the cave, I actually have the map in my head. Okay, so that's something you have to earn. You have to pay for that, of course. It's been a lot of work, a lot of hard work. And at some moment, you have to ask to recover what you spent.
Yeah, exactly. And from a safety point of view as well, I know myself, when I went to Sardinia recently, I was on a bunch of guided dives there, which I just so appreciated, because it enabled me to learn the cave. And of course, I'm still responsible for my own safety. So I'm not any way passing on any responsibility to my guide for my own safety. I don't trust anybody with that except myself. Mm-hmm. But having said that, having a guide with me who knows the cave inside out, it just made it so much more enjoyable for me, because I had someone that I could rely on to some degree in terms of making sure that our base navigation was correct. Of course, I'm putting my own markers in the cave where I felt it was appropriate, but at the same time, it was fantastic. The same with Ed Sorensen. Ed took me on a bunch of guided dives in Jackson Blue, Hole in the Wall, and I just absolutely so much enjoyed that. And of course, you are able to go further, I think, than you would yourself if you were just saying, hey, I'm on my own here. You'd certainly be a hell of a lot more conservative. So I think the whole enjoyment factor, learning the history of the cave and having somebody there to share the experience, I think €8 is nothing to me for that. I would thoroughly encourage anyone who's going to a new region to look out for guides or experienced buddies, I guess is the other way, but at least one of those to make sure that you're going to be safe on your first dives.
And not only for safety, they enjoy it a lot. They enjoy your company, they enjoy your experience. At the end, you're spending a whole morning with them and talking about adventures you had in the cave. So you as well pay for the company of your new buddy there. Of knowing people. It's, in diving, we like to meet new people a lot. And to dive with new people.
Yeah, and to talk about it afterwards, right? So going back for a cerveza or something and some tapas, and that to me is diving full stop, to enjoy a great day and then share it with the people that you dive with, I think is exactly the best thing.
Yes, at the end, having a guide means that you follow correctly your plan. You are not missing something. And you have, if something happens, you have a quick response because that guy knows how to do normally. So you're a trained cave diver, but as you said, you are in a more calm mindset because you know that that guy's going with you through the correct passage and following the correct plan and will help you with everything and give you little tricks for that cave. I think it's a more enjoyable experience if you're, as we call, a sports cave diver.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the other thing you just mentioned, the route and that sort of thing. I mean, it's very easy in a lot of caves to get yourself somewhere where you don't really want to be. So you had a certain dive plan, but if you don't know where that goes or you're not sure of the conditions in that part of the cave, you can get yourself in a situation which is kind of beyond your experience, beyond your comfort zone. And you don't really want that either. I mean, if you're planning for it, fine. But if you're not, it's another thing that you need to be aware of, huh?
That's pretty common in this cave. Narrow galleries, all muddy walls that you maybe don't want to be there for the first time. So maybe when you have experience enough, you can try, but not the first time there. You're going to do a jump in a narrow gallery.
Yeah, I've done a couple of those recently. So the Hole in the Wall is one where I dived with Ed, which is extremely silty as well. So I was asking him, how deep does the silt go? And he said, they put a pole in the silt to see how deep it goes, and it went down 10 feet and didn't stop. So there's 10 feet of silt there. And I had a huge amount of fun going through that with Ed behind me, filming it and desperately trying not to make a mess in his face sort of thing. So it was a lot of fun. And a similar thing in the Bone Room and a few places in Sardinia, although not as silty as Hole in the Wall was. So it can be a lot of fun if your skill level is up for it, and not so much fun if you're not, Raheem.
I think those kind of galleries, talking here about the Cueva del Agua, are very cool for Sidemount rebreather diving. Because if you have your skills and you have the rebreather, you're going to be super ninja style inside the cave. It's going to be amazing.
Do you dive a rebreather yourself?
I got a sidewinder, but then the lockdown came and I have it in a box. I'm waiting to use it. But I have it here. I met Mike Young here, who was here to dive the cave. And he showed me his unit. I just fell in love when he took it out of hand suitcase. And it was like, whoa, that's everything. Yeah, ready to dive. This is my rebreather, ready to dive. I'm going to dive now. And it was inside a very small suitcase. And I was like, well, that's what I need. I don't want a 47 kilos back mount unit. So I think it's a game changer. I have it there in a box waiting for the high season to end so I can start my training.
Well, you have a real treat coming up. Again, thinking of Cueva del Agua, I mean, one of the beautiful things about rebreather diving is you really don't need to carry 11-litre cylinders with you anymore. You can grab some smaller cylinders, be they 7-litre steels or 5.6-litre aluminiums, and you can take them, and that's tons of gas for a rebreather. Yeah, it's just so much fun being able to handle such a lightweight amount of equipment. And the Sidewinder itself, I mean, it's a loop, it's 2 canisters and a counterlung, and the heads are really compact and sit on top. And Patrick Woodman's traveling with 23 kilos, and that's everything. That's his rebreather, that's his undergarments, that's his dry suit. Yeah, and I haven't achieved that
yet. It's like a joke, eh?
It almost is, and I think obviously he's only wearing one pair of underwear, I think. But the bottom line is it's super lightweight and a lot of fun once you've got it dialed in. I've still been working on mine because I had the same problem. I trained with Ed last September. And then when I came back to New Zealand, I couldn't easily find the cylinders that I needed for it. So 2-litre cylinders are really difficult to get here for your O2. And then I had trouble getting the right size of diluent and bailout cylinders. And it took me till about December to find everything that I needed to put it back in the water. And then, of course, I had to start really slowly because it was nearly 2 months after I'd finished my training. So I had to go back in little baby steps. But now,
that's how you do it.
I'm old enough and wise enough and been around long enough to know that every single time you take a break, you have to go way back, go back to the beginning and step yourself back up again over a series of dives. So I'm now getting up to almost 50 hours on the unit, and now I'm feeling really comfortable again and starting to progress myself further with it. There's still some challenges. I'm good on it now at depth. So in terms of my open circuit skills versus the Sidewinder, I'm now at depth. That's anything over 6 meters, I'm fine. But that 6 meter stop is still a little bit challenging for me, managing the 3 gas spaces. And I find myself at 6 and I'm thinking, oh yeah, I'm really comfortable. And then all of a sudden I'm floating up for some reason. I'm not really sure why. And then I dump some gas and now I'm too negative and too positive and too negative. So it's a bit of a game and I'm getting better and better every dive, but it's fun to go back to the beginning a little bit and learn how to progress again.
To learn new things, eh?
Exactly. But one thing, I mean, for Cave del Agua, in any cave diving, Ed has this saying, and it's one of the best sayings I think about rebreather diving there is, which is what rebreathers do for you in a cave is they eliminate stress. And it's gas stress, distance stress, and time stress. So when you're on a rebreather, you have the ability to be able to go much further for much longer and you have enough gas. Now, of course, you have to manage your bailout to make sure that if you get at the furthest point that you are with a contingency, you can swim out on your bailout. So that's a given, and you cannot, just like the gas rules for open circuit, you cannot compromise that in any way, shape or form. But if you do have a problem and you don't have to bail out, but you have an issue to solve inside the cave, for instance, a navigation issue or an entanglement issue or anything else like that, or you find that the visibility is gone and you're much slower coming out of the cave, provided your rebreather's functioning, you've got hours to solve the problem.
Yeah, time is gold, eh?
It absolutely is. And so it does make you chill out. It also makes you slow down because, again, there's no rush to get to a particular point in the cave.
No,
so
you can even wait. If you have a zero visibility situation, you can even wait. Just till everything settle down. You have several hours, so let's wait here, no problem. I have my line. I don't see anything, but I have the line, so let's wait. So it's pretty cool. My idea to buy the rebreather is because I want to go longer. For me, the open circuit is now limiting because you have to pass through several restrictions, and to go with 6 tanks, 7 tanks is not a good configuration. For me, having more than 4 tanks, it's complicating things. So when you reach that limit in open circuit, you have to look after other options. And I think the Sidewinder is a very cool option for this cave because you can go into restrictions with it. And for me, just again, a Sidemount is a tool to explore or to discover further. Okay, so I think, as I told Mike Young, this is going to be my tool for this cave. And I hope to discover new galleries there because the exploration team is doing a great job at the end of the cave, the current end of the cave. So I hope to get my training soon and to start building up hours and experience. And maybe we can dive together with the Sidewinders one day.
That would be awesome. And is it still the 2 old gentlemen? I never got their names, but there were these 2 amazing old guys who, when I was there in 2015, I think it was, or 16, who came in. They must have been in their 70s or something, and with all this old gear, all this homemade equipment, lights and everything. Is it still them doing the exploration?
They're still there. They are reaching, as I told you, more than 5 kilometers now.
Wow.
And they use the same gear. I think they are self-taught. So they use steel tanks with a wetsuit, very big steel tanks. They dive with I think 7 or 8 tanks per diver, which is crazy for me. But they do it. They have plans. They know their experience. They have done it a lot of times. And well, they are exploring. Those are real explorers, not we told the sports ones. So, well, they are discovering. You can see here the map I have in my at home. It's a great job they are doing. But yes, they are now reaching a very limiting point. And I guess, well, they could think maybe in a rebreather as well.
Very, very good. Well, Victor, we've gone for a fair amount of time, and I've really enjoyed learning more about what you do with Cave Tribe. And as I said again, I just love that name. I think it's one of the best names in cave diving. And I compliment you on the way that you go about teaching. I think that is the right way. And so by all means, keep that up. And I would love to come and dive again in Cave del Agua with you and to find out some more about that cave. And if anyone's thinking of cave diving in Europe, Cave del Agua should be certainly on your list. It's a beautiful part of Spain, so it's a nice place to visit. The food is good. People are great. There's beaches, and at the same time, you've got this amazing cave on your doorstep. Thanks so much for sharing with us, Victor, and I hope we can catch up sometime soon.
Thank you very much, Steve, for this opportunity, and I really expect you came someday here to dive together. Okay, so I can go with you to some very interesting points far away from the exit in the Cueva del Agua.
Awesome. Thank you, mate.
Thank you. Bye.
Hey, thanks so much for joining me on this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did catching up with Victor. Unfortunately, I've since found Victor's needed to take a break from diving due to COVID, so I wish him all the best and hope that he's able to get back to developing great divers sometime soon. Thanks again to X-Deep for their support of this podcast. It means so much, and I highly encourage you to check out all of their gear. It really is the best gear available for side mount diving in particular. And if you happen to be a back mount diver, they have some amazing equipment available for back mount new regulator sets. So please have a look at them. And also big thanks to our Patreons who support this podcast every month. It means so much, and I'm really appreciative of everything you do to help me make this podcast possible. I look forward to catching you all again in the next episode. You've been listening to Speaking Sidemount from www.sidemountpros.com. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and consider leaving us a 5-star review. If there's something you'd like us to cover on the show, then let us know via our Facebook page listed in the podcast notes. Thanks again, and we look forward to you joining us on our next episode of Speaking Sidemount.